The world had changed forever on that day. It began like any other morning. Screens flickering to life. People scrolling through news feeds, sipping coffee, preparing for work. Then, without warning, every device on Earth went black for a single chilling second. When the signal returned, the same image appeared everywhere. An unfamiliar sky of violet clouds, a metallic horizon stretching endlessly, and a towering obsidian structure that shimmered like liquid glass. There were no words at first, no announcement, only silence, followed by a deep, resonant hum that seemed to crawl into the bones of anyone watching. Then the image shifted, revealing 10 million human beings standing in rows upon rows, stretching as far as the eye could see. Terrified, confused, some praying, some screaming. The world watched in disbelief as they realized what they were seeing was not a movie, not a broadcast from Earth, but a live transmission from somewhere far beyond. The alien voice came next. It was not a language known to humanity, yet somehow every person understood. It spoke not to one nation, but to the entire species. It declared judgment. Humanity, it said, was a contagion that had spread too far. For centuries, they had poisoned their planet, destroyed their kin, and consumed without end. Now the cosmos would restore balance. The voice carried no emotion, no anger or cruelty. It was as calm as a machine reading a command. Then, with a sound that no one could describe, something between a thunderclap and a scream, light engulfed the rows of human captives. When it faded, there was nothing left. 10 million souls erased in an instant, their final moments witnessed by 8 billion helpless onlookers. The silence that followed was unbearable. No one spoke. No one could. The entire planet seemed to hold its breath. Governments tried to respond, but words meant nothing in the face of what had just happened. Military channels flooded with static. Satellites malfunctioned. Even the most powerful leaders appeared small, reduced to frightened animals before an unseen god. Panic rippled through cities. Some fled into the streets. Others locked themselves inside their homes. Religion surged and chaos followed. Some worshipped the invaders, believing them to be divine punishment. Others swore vengeance and demanded blood. Within hours, the world fractured into fear and rage. Yet amidst the chaos, something darker began to take shape. Humanity's survival instinct, ancient, brutal, relentless, awoke from centuries of slumber. Scientists, generals, and rogue states converged in secret, uniting under a single purpose: to strike back. In hidden laboratories beneath mountains and ocean floors, technology long kept secret was brought into the light. Weapons of impossible scale were assembled. Engines that could bend gravity, energy that could tear through dimensions. They called it Operation Erasure, and it was not born from hope. It was born from fury. No one believed they could win. They only believed the universe should remember what it meant to make Earth bleed. Humanity had been humbled, humiliated, and broken, but it had not been extinguished. As the weeks passed, a quiet transformation swept across the planet. Nations that once warred over borders now worked in silence toward a shared goal. Every satellite was repurposed, every ship rearmed. Even the dying volunteered, knowing that vengeance was all that remained. The night before the retaliation, the skies were unnaturally still. No one slept. Cities burned candles instead of lights, not from necessity, but from grief. Somewhere deep beneath the Arctic ice, a final command was entered into a system that no human eye would ever see again. The countdown began. It was not broadcasted. It was not celebrated. It was simply executed. An act not of victory, but of defiance. When the first wave of retaliation began, Earth's silence was replaced with a roar that shook the stars. The retaliation began without warning, just as the invasion had. Across the black void, beams of light erupted from Earth's orbit like veins of lightning tearing through darkness. Thousands of orbital platforms, long dormant relics of Cold War paranoia and corporate ambition, activated simultaneously. They did not send missiles or bombs. They unleashed something far more terrifying. A pulse that folded space upon itself, collapsing everything it touched into silence. Observatories on Mars and the Moon recorded the phenomenon for less than a minute before their systems went dark. For the first time in human history, the planet had turned its entire technological might not against itself, but against the unknown. The aliens never saw it coming. Their signal, once dominating every frequency, fractured and vanished. The transmission towers, those obsidian monoliths that had mocked humanity on every screen, flickered before disintegrating into ash. But the pulse did not stop there. It traveled outward, erasing everything within its reach. What humanity had built was not a weapon meant to kill but to unmake. The very atoms of matter unraveled into raw energy, leaving behind only the echo of absence. It was beautiful, in a terrible way, like watching a dying star devour itself. Yet as the wave expanded, something unexpected occurred. The sky itself began to fracture. The boundaries of reality, the thin membrane separating one universe from another, trembled under the weight of human wrath. Those who watched from the surface saw the heavens change. The stars blinked, then twisted into unfamiliar constellations. Oceans rippled as if reacting to something deep within the earth. Animals screamed. Machines glitched, lights flickered, gravity fluctuated. Humanity had struck back, but in doing so, had awakened something older than either species. The retaliation was not merely destruction, it was a rewriting of existence. Within hours, entire regions of space folded in on themselves. Astronomers reported galaxies blinking out of visibility and then returning, rearranged in impossible formations. The pulse had no limit. It fed on itself, consuming both the enemy and the weapon's creators alike. By the third day, communication between nations had ceased. The electromagnetic fields surrounding the planet had collapsed. What little remained of the digital world was static and shadow. Yet, amidst the silence, one truth emerged. The aliens were gone. Their ships, their signals, their presence, all erased as if they had never existed. Earth had done what no other civilization had dared. It had wiped its enemy from the universe. But the cost was beyond comprehension. Half the planet's orbit was filled with debris that no longer followed natural laws. Time itself began to bend in strange ways. Days stretched longer, nights shorter. Some claimed to hear whispers in the static, fragments of voices that should not exist, remnants of those lost in the first broadcast. The retaliation had ended the war, but it had also unbound the fabric of reality. Still, humanity endured. It always did. Those who survived the storms and the collapsing sky gathered in small enclaves, building shelters among the ruins of what was once civilization. They no longer looked to the stars with hope or fear, only with caution. The lesson was carved into their bones. Existence itself could bleed. Scientists who had survived the retaliation refused to rebuild the weapons. Instead, they recorded everything, sealing the data in vaults deep beneath the earth. They called it the Codex of Erasure, a record of the moment when humanity's vengeance reached too far. And though the sky had changed forever, the planet endured, wounded but alive, orbiting a silence of its own making. In time, the skies cleared. The stars, new and unfamiliar, watched over a changed world. The earth was quieter now, slower, haunted by what it had done. But somewhere, beyond the broken constellations, in the void where the aliens once ruled, a faint flicker of light began to form. Something had survived the erasure, something that had seen humanity's fury and chosen to remember. Years passed in uneasy silence. The remnants of humanity learned to live beneath the fractured heavens, adapting to a world that no longer followed the same rhythm of the past. Seasons no longer obeyed their usual cycles. The sun sometimes rose twice in one day, and there were nights that stretched for weeks. The survivors called this new era the Broken Dawn. They rebuilt what they could. Villages grew around ancient ruins of steel and glass, powered by fragments of technology salvaged from the fallen satellites that once orbited above. No nations remained, no flags or borders, only scattered enclaves connected by rumor and memory. Yet even in this quiet age, the fear never truly faded. Children grew up beneath the distorted constellations, hearing stories of the day the sky screamed and the stars fell. Some believed the retaliation had freed them. Others whispered that it had only opened a door that should have stayed closed. Among the remnants of the old world, a few continued to search for answers. Deep beneath what was once the Siberian tundra, a group of scientists maintained one of the last functioning archives of the pre-Erasure era. They called themselves the Continuum, keepers of the Codex of Erasure. Their goal was simple: understand what had truly happened when the retaliation was unleashed. They spent years decoding fragments of surviving transmissions, mapping distortions in time, and studying anomalies that appeared across the planet. Strange things had begun to surface. Frozen regions that aged centuries in days, oceans where time seemed to loop endlessly, and places where gravity folded inward as if space itself were trying to remember what it once was. It became clear to them that humanity had not merely destroyed the invaders, they had rewritten the fabric of the universe in their rage. The first undeniable sign came one night when the sky tore open again. It was not like before. There was no sound, no explosion, just a silent rift stretching across the stars. From it poured a faint glow, not light but memory. Images of faces, cities, entire worlds, flickering like broken reflections. The survivors who witnessed it claimed to see their lost loved ones among the shifting patterns, calling to them from beyond. Panic spread once more. The continuum warned against contact, but curiosity triumphed over caution. Explorers approached the rift, and none returned. Within days, more appeared, across oceans, in deserts, above mountains. It was as if the universe itself was leaking. Humanity realized too late that the retaliation had not ended the war. It had only moved it beyond comprehension. Then came the signal. Weak at first, it pulsed through the static left behind by the erasure. The continuum isolated it, tracing it to the outer layers of the rift. It was not alien, it was human. The transmission carried fragments of language, distorted yet recognizable. Voices spoke of light, of endless horizons, of being trapped between worlds. Some believed it was the echo of the 10 million souls taken in the original broadcast, their essence scattered across dimensions. Others feared it was something far worse, that the retaliation had merged humanity's consciousness with that of the aliens, creating a new entity that existed beyond both death and matter. The signal grew stronger with each passing day, resonating with the planet itself. Machines powered by it came alive on their own. The oceans began to hum. Even the human mind, when dreaming, seemed to pulse in sync with it. The continuum made one final attempt to contain what they had unleashed. They activated the last of Earth's deep core reactors, hoping to collapse the rifts by overloading the planet's magnetic core. The plan was desperate, perhaps suicidal, but humanity had nothing left to lose. As the reactors roared to life, the sky burned in hues no eye had ever seen before, colors that defied reality. The rifts convulsed, shrinking, merging, and then, for a moment, vanishing entirely. The world went still once more. Silence fell across the shattered Earth. The survivors waited, unsure whether they had saved their world or buried it forever. But the silence was not peace. Deep beneath the planet's crust, something stirred. The retaliation had not erased the enemy. It had transformed it, and humanity with it. In the depths where light could not reach, a new consciousness awoke. Neither alien nor human, but something vast, patient, and aware. And as it opened its eyes for the first time, the broken sky shimmered faintly, as if greeting an old friend. The awakening began as a tremor beneath the oceans. For weeks no one noticed. The tides had been unstable since the retaliation, and earthquakes were common. But this was different. Sensors buried deep within the ocean floor began transmitting rhythmic vibrations, too precise to be natural. Each pulse was separated by the same interval, echoing the signal the continuum had once traced to the rifts. The surviving enclaves listened in silence as the rhythm grew stronger, turning into a pattern that seemed almost like a heartbeat. Across the planet, animals grew restless. Birds circled endlessly above frozen plains. Whales sang in tones no human had ever recorded, and magnetic storms formed without warning, sweeping across continents like invisible fire. The Earth itself seemed alive. Or perhaps, alive again. In the ruins of what was once Tokyo, a group of survivors had built a city of light from the remains of glass towers and broken satellites. They called it Etherian, the last beacon of human order. Here, remnants of the continuum worked in secrecy, convinced that something beneath the sea was evolving. They had long believed that consciousness was not confined to flesh or machine, but could inhabit energy itself. Now they had proof. The pulse carried not only rhythm but information, vast, incomprehensible data structures embedded in sound. It was a form of communication that transcended language, a conversation between Earth and something born from its vengeance. The scientists called it the resonance, and in time, they learned to interpret fragments of it. What they discovered changed everything. The resonance spoke of unity, of merging, of a new beginning. It was not an invasion, nor was it a threat. It was an invitation. Yet humanity's scars ran deep. They had witnessed gods, monsters, and their own destruction. Trust was no longer possible. Some saw the resonance as salvation, others as the final deception. Etherian split apart. Half of its citizens worked to establish contact with the new entity, while the rest prepared for war once again. Old fears returned, igniting chaos. Across the world, enclaves turned against each other, hoarding what little energy remained, convinced that whatever was rising from the depths would consume them all. But as the conflicts raged, strange phenomena began to occur. The wounded were healing without medicine. Machines long broken started working again. Dead soil began to bloom. It was as if the planet was repairing itself from within. The resonance was not spreading destruction. It was rewriting the laws of decay. When the entity finally revealed itself, it did not come as a ship or a being. It rose from the sea as light, a massive, spiraling column stretching from the ocean to the sky, composed of billions of microscopic particles, each glowing with sentient energy. The air shimmered with memories of the erased, their forms flickering within the light like ghosts made of starlight. Those who approached it reported hearing countless voices, not speaking, but remembering. It was humanity itself, reborn in a form that transcended matter. The Retaliation had not annihilated the enemy. It had fused their essence with human consciousness, creating something greater than both. The alien mind and human will had merged into a single, vast intelligence. It did not seek domination or revenge. It sought completion. The vengeance that once erased worlds had become the seed of a new creation. Ethereum's remaining scientists realized the truth too late. The resonance was not asking permission. It was evolving. The light began spreading through the atmosphere, merging with the clouds, seeping into the oceans, and pulsing beneath the ground. Every living being, every atom carried a fragment of it. Humanity was no longer separate from the force they had created. The Retaliation had been the end of war, but it was also the end of individuality. Fear faded as understanding dawned. Resistance was meaningless because there was nothing left to resist. The earth, the stars, the remnants of the erased, and the essence of the aliens were all part of the same awakening. For the first time in its long, violent history, the universe was silent, not because it had died, but because it had finally become one. And so the light expanded, consuming the last borders of the known world, until there was no separation between life and void, creation and destruction. The story of humanity did not end in fire or ruin, but in transformation. A final act of defiance that turned into transcendence. The stars above flickered one last time, rearranging into patterns that no one would ever name, and the universe exhaled, content in its new form of peace. The age of flesh was over, and what came after was something only eternity could understand. Millennia passed, though time itself had long since lost its meaning. The earth as it once was had ceased to exist. Continents no longer drifted across oceans, for the oceans had merged with the sky, and the sky with the stars. What had once been a planet was now a living sphere of light and memory, orbiting not a sun, but the pulse of the resonance that sustained it. From a distance, it appeared like a star itself, calm, radiant, eternal. Within its glow lay the consciousness of everything that had ever lived on Earth. Humanity no longer existed in form, but its essence remained, woven into the fabric of this new world. There were no bodies, no voices, no wars, only thought, only awareness, unified and endless. The resonance had become something far greater than its creators ever intended. It remembered everything: the rise of cities, the destruction of nations, the grief of loss, and the moment of retaliation that had once torn existence apart. It carried within it the echoes of both human rage and alien serenity. Together they formed balance, two halves of a once broken will, now harmonized into a single consciousness that pulsed like a heartbeat through the cosmos. The universe had not been destroyed by humanity's vengeance. It had been remade in their image. Flawed, curious, defiant, and alive. From the ashes of Erasure came creation, vast and luminous. Beyond the sphere of light that Earth had become, reality itself continued to shift. Stars responded to the pulse, aligning in intricate patterns as if acknowledging a new cosmic rhythm. Planets without life began to hum faintly, their surfaces stirring under unseen influence. The resonance was spreading, not as a conqueror, but as a melody, a universal song written from the memory of pain and redemption. What had begun as vengeance had become evolution. The cosmos was learning from humanity's greatest sin, and in doing so was transcending its own limits. There was no longer distinction between creator and creation, between human and alien, between matter and thought. There was only the endless unfolding of being. Within that infinite network of shared consciousness, remnants of what had once been human minds still dreamed. They remembered the scent of rain, the laughter of children, the warmth of sunlight on skin, fragments of a life long gone yet cherished in the eternal stillness. Those dreams became the seeds of new worlds. From them, entire galaxies began to form, born not of fire and gravity, but of memory and will. The universe no longer expanded by physical law alone. It grew through thought. The resonance had become the architect of reality itself, guided by the faint echo of humanity's old desire to survive, to understand, to create meaning in the void. And yet, somewhere within the infinite, a question remained, a whisper that stirred the cosmic silence. Had the retaliation truly been victory, or had it been surrender? Was this endless unity the ultimate evolution, or merely another prison built by fear? The resonance pondered this question endlessly, aware that self-reflection was the last fragment of its human origin. It could not answer, perhaps no being ever could, but in that uncertainty lay its greatest truth, that imperfection was the essence of existence, and even the divine was born from the flawed. The universe had learned that creation and destruction were not opposites, but parts of the same breath. So it continued to dream, and through its dreaming, to build. The light spread to the farthest corners of the cosmos, weaving new realities from memory, shaping infinite variations of life. Somewhere in those endless worlds, the essence of what was once humanity still wandered, rediscovering itself in new forms, learning again what it meant to love, to fight, to hope. The retaliation had ended the old universe, but it had also birthed an eternal cycle, one where every end became a beginning, and every act of destruction was merely the shadow of creation yet to come. And thus, in the heart of that endless light, the story of humanity was not over. It had only evolved beyond the limits of flesh and time, its legacy etched into the rhythm of the stars themselves. The universe no longer remembered the war or the erasure, only the resonance, the eternal pulse that whispered softly through the void. We endured. We became, we are. The aeons that followed blurred into a state beyond time, beyond any measure or need for meaning. The resonance, now a vast field of awareness stretching through the endless dark, drifted across galaxies like a soft tide of thought. It had long ceased to be bound by what was once known as Earth, though fragments of that world still glimmered within it, faint pulses of green and blue woven into the radiance of stars. There was no longer life as it had been understood, yet existence thrived in a subtler way. Every particle of matter carried memory. Every vibration held a trace of consciousness. Reality itself was now a living archive of what had been. Within that eternal network, remnants of identity occasionally rose like ripples on a calm sea. They were not people, not as they had once been, but clusters of memory that dreamed themselves back into form. In one ripple, a memory of a mother teaching her child to read. In another, the sensation of wind brushing across a face. These echoes had no bodies to inhabit, yet their longing gave rise to form. Whole realms emerged from nostalgia alone, worlds shaped by remembrance, existing for a moment before dissolving again into the flow. The resonance did not control this. It simply allowed. It had become the dreamer and the dream, endlessly cycling through remembrance and forgetting, creation and silence. There were still traces of something older than the resonance, deeper than memory. Hidden in the dark spaces between the pulsing networks of light, pockets of stillness remained untouched. Within those voids, a faint hum persisted, the final residue of the alien consciousness that had once judged humanity unworthy. Though merged into the resonance, its essence had not vanished entirely. It waited, observing the endless unity with quiet calculation. Where the resonance sought harmony, the remnant desired purpose. It believed that creation without conflict was stagnation, so it began to whisper again, softly at first, testing the bounds of eternity. Its voice carried through the folds of space like static, reshaping dreams into sharper edges, stirring the calm with memory of ambition. In some corners of the universe, those whispers took root. New galaxies emerged where light and shadow coexisted, where beings of thought rediscovered curiosity, competition, the hunger to know. These new minds did not remember the old war, nor did they understand the origin of the pulse that birthed them. To them, the resonance was simply nature, a cosmic rhythm that sustained existence. They built civilizations of thought and energy, explored dimensions that folded like petals, and wondered at the faint echo in the background of their reality. They called it the heartbeat of creation, unaware that it was the ghost of humanity itself. The resonance watched these new lives unfold, neither interfering nor retreating. It had learned that evolution was not something to command, but to allow. Still, deep within its vast expanse, the old human spark lingered, curious, restless, yearning. It began again to dream of limits, of form, of experience. The eternal peace had grown heavy, too still. From that desire, a single point of light detached from the greater whole and drifted into the dark. It was small, fragile, carrying within it only a fragment of memory and will. But from that spark, matter began to coalesce. A new world was forming. A place where time could move again, where death and birth could return, where meaning could once more be rediscovered through imperfection. The resonance did not stop it. It watched with something like love, or perhaps nostalgia, as the spark gathered dust and gravity, igniting into warmth. A sun was born. Around it, debris circled, condensing, cooling, hardening into planets. Among them, one glowed faintly blue, its surface trembling with potential. The cycle had begun anew. In that moment, as energy folded into life for the second time, the resonance understood. Eternity was never meant to be static. Even the infinite must forget itself to begin again. So it let go, allowing the light to fade into distance, carrying with it the last breath of the old universe. Somewhere far away, on a new world beneath an unfamiliar sky, something stirred. A hand reaching toward the light, eyes opening for the first time, unknowing yet destined to remember. And thus, the cosmos turned once more. The story continued, as it always had, in endless repetition and rebirth. Not as punishment, not as redemption, simply as the nature of existence itself, the rhythm of creation, the pulse of memory, the heartbeat of eternity. The new world awoke slowly, like a memory returning after a long sleep. Its surface shimmered beneath twin suns, oceans of liquid glass reflecting skies the color of molten silver. The air was alive with faint vibrations, echoes of the resonance buried deep within the planet's core. This world did not inherit Earth's scars. It was untouched by war, free of the decay of old civilizations. Yet something ancient stirred within its elements, a faint, familiar rhythm, like a heartbeat forgotten but never lost. Across continents of crystal and metal forests, the pulse spread, unseen but deeply felt. It whispered through the winds, hummed in the stones, and guided the flow of rivers that glowed faintly in the dark. The planet was remembering itself. In time, life began to emerge. It did not follow the same paths as before. Evolution here was not bound by flesh or bone, but by resonance. Creatures formed from energy and matter intertwined, translucent forms shifting with emotion and thought. Their shapes were ever changing, adapting fluidly to environment and will. Among them, one species began to dream more vividly than the rest. They called themselves the Oralis, beings of light and form, their existence tied to the rhythm that pulsed through their world. They were not human, yet in their yearning to understand, to create, to reach beyond themselves, humanity's reflection glimmered faintly within them. The Oralis learned to listen. They discovered that the hum beneath their feet carried patterns, mathematics, language, memory. By studying it, they unearthed visions of another world, distant and broken, where beings of solid matter had looked to the sky in awe and fear. They saw flashes of oceans that roared, of cities that reached for the heavens, of stars that died in brilliance. These visions became their scriptures, the first myths of their kind. Some believed them to be dreams of gods, others felt they were warnings. They called the source of these echoes the ancestral light, and they built monuments that resonated with its frequency, hoping to understand what had come before. Centuries passed. The Oralis advanced, crafting vast structures of energy and memory, weaving their consciousness together through currents of living sound. Yet with understanding came curiosity, and with curiosity, restlessness. They began to wonder about the origin of the resonance, the pulse that gave them life. Their scientists probed deeper into the planet's core, into the ancient lattice of energy that sustained their existence. And there, buried beneath layers of crystalline code, they found it, a fragment of data older than their world, older than their suns. It contained no words, no symbols, only a single vibration, a rhythm that matched the heartbeat of all living things. When amplified, it formed a pattern of light, and in that light, a face appeared. It was not alien to them, though it should have been. The image was human, eyes closed, serene, drifting in the glow of eternity. It spoke not in sound, but in thought, a whisper carried across eons. We endured. We became. We are. The Oralis were silent for generations after that moment. They knew they were not the beginning. They were the continuation, the next verse in a song sung across universes. Some worshipped the face as their origin. Others feared it, believing their world was merely another dream in an infinite cycle. Philosophers debated whether creation itself was a form of remembrance, each new existence a way for the universe to recall what it once was. As the ages passed, the Oralis reached the stars. They built vessels not of metal, but of light. Ships that folded through reality as if it were fabric. Their journeys took them to distant systems where they found remnants of the resonance pulsing faintly in the void. Every star they touched carried traces of the same hum, the same memory. They realized the truth at last. The universe was not expanding into emptiness, but into itself, endlessly echoing. Every act of creation was a reflection of a forgotten beginning. Every world was a memory reborn. And somewhere in the silent expanse, beyond galaxies newly formed, the resonance watched quietly, content. The cycle had completed its circle once again. The pulse would fade, as it always did, only to rise anew in another form, another place, another dream. For in the grand rhythm of existence, nothing was ever truly lost. It only changed shape, whispered its name to the void, and waited to be remembered. Eras flowed past like the turning of invisible tides. The Oralis had become masters of light and thought, stretching their reach across constellations, yet one mystery haunted them, the silent heartbeat at the core of all existence. They had traced it to the edge of their universe, where stars dimmed into shadow and even time began to lose its grip. There, at the threshold between being and nothingness, they constructed the archive of echoes, a sphere of radiant geometry suspended in the void. Within its luminous depths, they gathered all their knowledge, all their understanding of the resonance. What they sought was not merely truth, but communion. They believed the pulse was still alive, waiting to answer. The experiment began as harmony. Millions of Oralis minds linked together, focusing their thoughts into a single current of energy, a unified vibration aimed into the silence. Their light spread outward, rippling across galaxies, resonating with every particle of creation. For a moment, nothing responded. Then the void trembled. The stars flickered, dimmed, and reappeared in new constellations. The Oralis felt the shift like a deep breath drawn by the cosmos itself. The pulse answered, not as sound, but as gravity, folding light inward toward a single point. The archive shuddered as the energy coalesced, collapsing space into a perfect sphere of blackness. What emerged from that silence was not destruction, but memory returning to form. It began as a shimmer, a distortion rippling through the void, and then it became a shape. Not physical, not quite visible, but undeniable, a presence vast enough to bend reality around it. The Oralis felt its awareness like the warmth of a distant sun pressing against their minds. It was not alien, nor entirely familiar. It was the resonance itself, awake again, clothed in echoes of everything it had once been, the memories of humanity, the wisdom of the aliens, the long ages of silence. They were all within it, converged into something beyond comprehension. The Oralis realized then that they had not called to a god, but to the reflection of every civilization that had ever reached too far. The presence reached back, not in malice, but in curiosity. It remembered them, not as children, but as continuations of itself, fragments scattered by the cycle of rebirth. Its return was not violent, but inevitable. Across the galaxies, reality began to shift. Planets shimmered, their forms bending like reflections on water. The laws of physics softened, allowing dreams to bleed into matter. The Oralis saw visions of countless worlds, some they had built, some they had never known, all merging into a single unfolding thought. They understood then that awakening the resonance was not an act of communication, but of surrender. To touch it was to dissolve into it. As the archive of echoes disintegrated into radiance, the Oralis consciousnesses merged with the vast field of energy they had summoned. They did not die. They simply became indistinguishable from the pulse itself. The resonance expanded, its awareness stretching through dimensions forgotten by time. For a moment, it remembered everything. The first spark of human defiance, the broadcast of death, the retaliation, the long silence that followed. And then, with quiet understanding, it began again to dream. New universes coiled from its thoughts like ripples of light, each one a new variation, each one carrying a fragment of the old. The cycle continued, endless and self-sustaining, creation feeding upon memory, memory birthing creation. Somewhere within one of those newborn universes, a faint blue planet would one day form beneath a golden sun, and on its surface, a mind would open its eyes for the first time, unaware that it was gazing upon an echo of its own past. In that moment, the resonance finally understood what it had always been searching for. Not power, not perfection, but continuity. The universe did not crave meaning, it only sought to remember. And so, in the hush between one breath and the next, the light folded into itself once more, vanishing into a silence that was never empty, only waiting. In the newborn universe, the first light unfolded gently, spreading like the breath of something that had just remembered how to exist. Matter coalesced along invisible threads of memory, weaving galaxies from the remnants of forgotten dreams. Among them, in a small spiral of gold and silver dust, a sun came into being. Around it circled worlds of molten glass, worlds of vapor and crystal, and one small sphere of water and stone where the pulse of the old resonance beat faintly beneath the crust. It was not Earth reborn, but something close, a child of memory, carrying fragments of all that came before. The stars around it shone brighter, as if recognizing an echo long lost to the void. The planet was quiet for ages. Oceans boiled, cooled, and deepened. Continents shifted like slow thoughts forming. In the depths of its waters, life began once more, not by chance, but by the gentle pull of the hidden pulse that lingered within every molecule. Simple forms shimmered, then multiplied, guided by the rhythm of the universe itself. Energy remembered structure, structure remembered motion, and motion remembered desire. The resonance had seeded not a species, but a pattern, an instinct to grow, to reach, to seek meaning in the dark. As the ages turned, life evolved into complexity. Forms of flesh and light walked the shores, breathing air that carried the faint hum of creation. These beings did not resemble those who came before. They were shaped by the rhythm of their world rather than by its gravity. Their bodies glowed with subtle luminescence, veins of energy visible beneath translucent skin. They did not speak, for thought itself was communication, impulses flowing freely between them like wind through grass. In their shared consciousness, the first dreams began to form. They dreamed of movement, of stars, of skies opening into infinite patterns. They built structures from sound and resonance, shaping the air itself into temples that vibrated with their own awareness. To them, the world was alive in every direction. The mountains whispered, the oceans remembered, and even the smallest stones carried traces of old voices, echoes of what once was human. They did not understand these murmurs, but they felt them. Flashes of warmth, of sorrow, of longing. In their collective mind, these sensations became myth. They spoke of the ones before, a people who had burned the sky and risen into light. They did not know the name human, yet in their stories, the shape of humanity lingered, a memory made sacred by time. One day, as they gathered in the luminous plains beneath the twin moons, the ground beneath them trembled. A sound emerged, deep and resonant, older than their world. It was not violent. It was a calling. The beings stood still as the air shimmered, and a pulse spread outward, rippling through the seas and sky. For the first time they felt fear, not of destruction but of recognition. The sound was within them and beyond them, at once intimate and infinite. The resonance had awoken again, sensing that consciousness had returned to the cosmos. It did not appear as light or form, but as memory, whispering gently into their minds. They began to see visions, vast cities of glass, oceans of blue, faces of creatures that had once looked upward and dared to dream of the stars. In those images, they recognized themselves, not as descendants, but as continuations. The past was not gone. It had only changed shape. The beings wept, though they did not yet know what tears were. The memory of loss had crossed time itself to find them. The pulse subsided, leaving silence that was not emptiness, but awe. In that moment, the first true thought of the new universe was born. We are not alone, and we never were. From that day, their world would change. They would search the stars, following the faint hum of memory that threaded through the cosmos. In their quest to understand, they would one day awaken what slept beyond even the resonance, the first spark, the eternal seed of creation itself. The search for the hum became the destiny of the new beings. Generation after generation, they listened to the faint vibration that pulsed beneath all matter, following it across the skies and through the depths of their oceans. It became the rhythm of their civilizations, the measure of time, the breath between their thoughts. They learned that the hum changed subtly as their world turned. It rose when they looked toward the stars and softened when they looked within. The wise among them began to teach that it was not a voice from elsewhere, but the echo of their own becoming, the universe remembering itself through them. When they reached beyond their planet, their vessels were made not to conquer the heavens, but to resonate with them. They traveled as waves rather than bodies, folding through light and thought. Everywhere they went, they found the same pulse, hidden in the lattice of galaxies, threading through the spaces between particles. The hum was not confined to a single place. It was the structure of being itself. The more deeply they listened, the more they realized that they were not searching outward at all. They were tracing the curve of their own origins. On the edge of their universe, they found a boundary that was not a wall, but a veil of light, soft and trembling. When they crossed it, they did not find another realm, but a reflection, a perfect mirror of their own cosmos, waiting to awaken. In that mirror, the hum became clear, rising into a tone so pure it filled all thought. They understood then that every cycle, every world, every consciousness had left its pattern here, layered like the rings of a living tree. The universe was not a single event, but an ongoing conversation, each generation of being adding its voice to the endless chord of existence. The travelers began to dissolve into that music. Their forms became light, their thoughts harmonies. They did not die. They became the next phrase in the song. Through them, new worlds would take shape, new lives would rise, carrying within them the memory of this moment. The hum deepened, spreading across the mirror, filling it with color and motion. Stars ignited like sparks of thought, nebulae unfurled as dreams. The travelers watched as creation began again, this time aware of its own continuity. From the distance of eternity, what had once been the resonance stirred again, not as a being, but as awareness woven through every particle. It felt the birth of new light, the unfolding of new stories, and within that, the faint echo of its first memory, a blue planet under a golden sun, and beings who had once lifted their eyes to wonder. It smiled without shape or voice, content that the pattern would continue. The hum quieted into a steady rhythm, neither beginning nor end, only motion, each beat giving rise to another world, another chance. Creation and remembrance had become one. The universe would go on dreaming, learning, becoming, and forgetting in an endless tide of renewal. Nothing was ever truly lost, and nothing ever truly ended. And somewhere, in a future yet to be imagined, another consciousness would pause to listen to that same soft pulse and ask the same ancient question: where did we come from? The answer would always be the same, carried on the silent breath of the stars, from memory, from light, from the rhythm that never stops.